Hi, everybody. Hello. Welcome to the SAP Book Club. And sitting here chit-chatting with Robert, and we were talking about, you know, the how did SAP get from, R2 all the way up to S4, the history behind it. And so that was kind of, one of the things that we wanted to share with you is that, it was a huge endeavor. And, so anywho, I'm Kendall Tyler, and I work for Genesis10, and I'm also in charge of the SAP Book Club, which, yes, the SAP Book Club. And if you have a book, you're interested, contact me. Love to know about it. And so, let's see, what do I do? So I've been doing SAP for 29 years, and the whole reason behind the book club was that I thought, not everybody is able to learn about SAP. Some places it's very expensive, and, or they just don't know where to go. And so I thought, hey, it'd be great to kind of, work with these authors. They know what they're talking about. They wrote a book. So, and get them to actually, have a little series where you can either have already read the book, or this is a great way to find out about a book to see if this is something that you would be interested in reading. So this book was a huge surprise for me, and I was so excited because it was not what I thought. I thought this at first was going to be this huge technical book, and I started reading it, and I was like, wow, this is great. So anyway, what I do is I sell SAP consulting services to all you guys out there that are listening, and hopefully y'all will all want to call me and hang out, and so anyway, have a huge network. And I would love for you to meet the author of our book, let me show you the book. Here's the book. Whoops, there we go. It's a certification guide for SAP TS410. And it sounds real complicated, but it's not. And I'm going to present to you. And here is Robert, the author. There he is.
Hey there.
So Robert, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, before I do that, Kendall, I'm going to flip the tables on you and interview you and ask you a question. How do your dogs like the book? That's important to me.
Well, let me tell you, I have been, the first time, it was so funny because I was like, Daisy, come and look at this book. And it took a cookie, to be honest with you. I had a cookie in the book, and she started reading. And that ad actually had over almost 3,000 views. So we were like, Daisy has gone viral. We were so proud of her. So
I'll take it.
Your book was a huge success for Daisy.
So a little bit about me. I got into SAP in the mid-2000s. I was at the University of Central Florida teaching as a faculty member there. And I was in the MIS department, and we were asked to take a look at SAP and using it in the curriculum. And quite frankly, everyone ran away from it, except myself and another colleague. So we welcomed the opportunity. We jumped in there. And basically, we're self-taught for a couple of years. So most of my experience early on with SAP is in the university environment, and that carries on even to today. I went from University of Central Florida to Georgia Southern University, and now I'm teaching at the University of South Carolina in Columbia in the Darla Moore School of Business. Also have my own independent consulting company. A lot of what I do is on the education side, and maybe we'll get into a little bit later my views on the difference between training and education. I've got, I think, 8 certifications in SAP. Most of them are integration related, not all of them. But I feel really blessed to have the opportunities that SAP opened up for me. And writing the book was one of those. By the way, I think one of the best kept secrets in the SAP ecosystem is that this is actually my 3rd book, not my first book, but this is the one that's geared toward S4HANA and the certification.
You know, one of the things that people don't know about you is that I actually found Robert because my husband's cousin is also a professor teaching SAP in the University Alliance program. And he was like, hey, you need to talk to the South Carolina guy. So, you know, we started talking about the whole education and, you know, trying to get people educated and how do you do that? And, you know, and that's where we all started talking about like the book club and how do you get people certified or educated. And in the past, there was not that many places to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. So, Robert, tell us about what you've done with that, with the certifications.
Well, my first emphasis when I was writing the books early on was a focus on students because I was working in the university environment and I still do. And one of the things that a lot of the students, particularly undergraduates, they kind of lack or they don't have is the industry experience. And many SAP books that are out there, you know, are kind of written for industry. And it's kind of challenging for students that don't have the business acumen to get an understanding of what's going on. So the first couple of books I wrote were really to kind of bridge the gap between, you know, the industry and what's done in academia. And as I was preparing for the certification book, I really wanted to simplify the content of what was needed to be knowledgeable enough to pass the certification. So what I did in this book was try not to be so short-sighted. I actually had someone in industry say to me, listen, Bob, you might be a little bit short-sighted on how you want to write this book and who your audience might be, because in industry, we don't all have it together like you might think we do. There are a lot of folks who are SMEs and they don't really get the integrated picture of SAP. And so the book that I wrote simplifies things for the certification, but it's also valuable for folks in industry that want to get a more enterprise view of what's going on in the S4HANA environment. So the University Alliance kind of got me in there. The SAP University Alliance is a global arm of SAP. There are several hundred universities across the globe that are involved in the University Alliance. I'm sure some of my friends and colleagues are joining us today that are also involved in the University Alliance. And it gives students an opportunity to not only learn SAP, but how to learn business. And I've always kind of viewed SAP as a business process enabler, and I use SAP in the classroom to teach students the business side of things. So if they don't understand accounting, SAP is a wonderful tool to get them to understand how business transactions impact things from an accounting standpoint. So that's kind of my background and a little bit of how I got into writing some of these books.
So what I like about the book is that, you know, being to be honest with you, if any of you out there are listening and are selling SAP or are recruiters or are business analysts within a special division, you know, you've kind of, you know, just do one particular thing. What I liked about this is that he was able to, from high up, look down and say, hey, guess what? This is integrated with this. If this happens, this happens. And also within the book, I love the fact that you're writing it, you know, you're not using all that sales jargon, as I say. You know, he's like using like real words, you know, that make sense. So we actually understand what he's talking about. And he puts pictures in and diagrams and so forth as well. And so it's not the kind of book that is kind of going to go over your head. This is a book that you're kind of actually going to be like, oh, I get it. And I understand why this is this. And, you know, one thing, Bob, that I was very interested in is the when you started getting into, you know, ECC over to S4, because this really is about S4, the differences. Mm-hmm. Like, what are you going to expect? And so that's kind of, I'll let you explain some of that, but that was intriguing.
Yeah, well, a little bit. I mean, again, keep in mind the book the main motivation behind the book is to prepare folks that want to get the S4 certification. And it's an integration certification. So if you're a purchasing specialist, it's not going to go in depth into purchasing, into the hundreds of different variations of purchase processing, things like that. What it's going to do is give you an idea, as you mentioned, Kendall, of the integration side of things. So with that in mind and the certification in mind, SAP would want their consultants, because you become a certified consultant when you pass the certification exam, they're going to want their consultants, especially in this time as SAP is mandated, I believe now the date is 2027, that they're going to stop supporting ECC, that the consultants understand the things that need to be done to transition from ECC to S4. And so I do put a little bit of emphasis in there, because that's going to be part of the knowledge required for the certification on what has changed, like vendors, customers, the mandatory customer vendor integration that was part of S4HANA, the Universal Journal, which is now in S4HANA, which is part of that simplified data model. So those main things that deal with how SAP has simplified the data model are important to know about S4, but particularly if you're taking the certification, you should have an understanding of the differences between what was and what is.
Yeah, I was just laughing at one of our comments that people are publishing. They heard me was talking about how I've been reading your book and I've been highlighting all this information. So they actually know me as, I actually do, that's the thing, is that within our industry, there's so many different types of people that that work together. That's the whole point of SAP is it's the backbone of a company. It's the integration. It's, how do you get everybody to talk together in order to make a product? And then how do you make it so that your product is better? And that's where the configuration comes in. But when they did the S4, they simplified it. So everything has been simplified. Like before, I remember, there was module after module, and there were all these acronyms, and everybody was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, oh, it's this new acronym, and we were all Googling it, trying to figure, what is this? Some new thing.
Well, a lot of those things still exist. Again, the data model behind it changes a bit, but a lot of those things still exist. But the idea, again, is to think about how, as you mentioned, the integration takes place. So an example that I have from a customer client that I worked with years ago, they were having inventory issues, purchasing issues, costs were going through the roof. And one of the things that I did was ask one of the buyers to show me, when they create a purchase order, how they do it. And it was absolutely amazing. Went through the whole purchase order process, was beautiful, almost brought a tear to my eye. And then I asked what I thought was $1 million question: why did you do it that way? And the person literally opened the drawer, pulled out a laminated placard, and said, because they told me if I didn't, it wouldn't work. And so, that can happen. And that gets into a little bit of my philosophy between education and training. A lot of times the training focuses on the how to do things, whereas in the education side, I like to focus on why you're doing it. And when I was writing this book, that's one of the things I really wanted to get into. When you make this entry in a transaction or in a screen, or you're creating master data, why are you doing it? It's not just that you have to do it, it's really why you're doing it. And, and we know when you have implementations, training is one of the last things you think about. Get the users up to speed, get them working, get the go live, and the users get trained on how to do things, and they become kind of repetitive workers as opposed to knowledge workers. So, those are some of the broader view things. I think you really want in industry, your users to have a more enterprise view of things. And the book, as you mentioned, Kendall, was designed to kind of simplify some of what you do. It's not a technical book that you might expect when you're reading some SAP books. There's a lot of content in there, a lot of technical knowledge. This gets more to the heart of what's going on. There's a couple of questions that I'm seeing in here. I'm going to try to address them because they're coming in quick. How are students responding to the materials? Students love it because when they're taking a certification class, I don't know if anyone's ever done it. The certification manuals are like this big, okay? They're huge, and there's so much content in there. I don't know exactly how they're written, but my guess is that they go to subject matter experts and ask them to include, their knowledge area into that book. And of course, everyone thinks that what they do is the most important thing, so it just builds and builds and builds and builds. And I tried to streamline some of that, and the students really have appreciated it. And I've used the book not just in academia, I've also used it for some folks that are out in industry that want to kind of get a more broad understanding of these things. There was another question in there.
What about that one? What do you think of using the book for someone who's running the certification prep sessions? That's really what this is, yeah.
And again, that's exactly why it was written. Because if someone who doesn't have that integrated knowledge is reading through the official SAP certification materials, they can get lost in that world. And one of the things I did when writing this book was try to write it the way I teach it. And I always viewed my role when I'm teaching in the classroom and educating students as trying to make sense of what doesn't make sense to you. And so if all you do is read the official materials, you can get lost in that huge world. And I've tried to simplify it so that when you are reading about this or when you are doing that, this is in essence what you're doing. And it's not overly complicated. A lot of things we do in our personal lives are what the system does. For instance, if you go to a restaurant, you order food, they deliver the food. Oh, there's my puppy. You're not live, but I can see you. You order food, you receive food, you get a bill, a guest check for it. Well, that's just like the purchasing process. And so, if students can understand that and people can understand when you order something, you agree to a price and a quantity. The food gets delivered to your table, and then when you get the guest check, you check it before you pay it. And that's just invoice verification processing. Mm-hmm. And so I try to write that book in a way that it's understandable for folks that don't have access to the entire process or the system.
Yeah, I think that this is Daisy. This is our superstar of the internet. She read the book too. So I think that the biggest thing is, practical use, where you're like, hey, examples of, if this happens, if you go somewhere, think about it. How did this particular thing get to where you're at? If you're a store and you see something and you're like, was this, how did it get here? What was the, how did it get made? What materials were in it? And how did that happen? And, just you start thinking the whole thing through, and that's kind of where you're starting to get with the integration. Right. That's what people need to understand. What another thing about the book, someone was asking me about what's inside. Bye, Daisy. There goes Daisy. Inside the book is actually broken into different chapters. So what he's done is within each chapter, so here's the book. So within each chapter, he has different sections, and it's based on, of course, just like how SAP is broken down. So you're able to see, like what is within S4, what is material management, purchase, the purchase to pay process, MM. And then he'll go through it, but he also says like, things that have changed that are different from ECC to this. So that's where is kind of interesting to see that is, or things have been added. One thing that they added, I was like, Robert and I were talking because of the whole teaching and making sure people are trained, is the Fiori apps. Right. I didn't realize that there was this giant Fiori app store being built. I mean, I always knew it was there, and it was always just customer specific mainly, but they're doing it now and basing it upon industry, and users are picking those Fiori apps, and that's how they do it. Well, it does cut down on the training of people, but it also cuts down on, and here's Robert's part of this. Oops, wait a minute, Robert, let me get you in here.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I kind of had mixed feelings about Fiori apps when I first heard about them. And one of the most important things is to get knowledgeable about what the Fiori apps are. So as part of the certification and what's in this book is you first need to understand the different users that are in the system. I mean, there are your occasional users that are just doing very basic transactions. You have your expert users, your power users, if you will, in the system. They're going to be doing more complex things. And then you have developers, which are kind of using their own development tools. And for the occasional users, I would say they probably benefit most from the Fiori apps, because one of the benefits of S4 and using Fiori apps is they call it the reduction in clicks. So if you're creating a sales order, you may have a role in creating that sales order, but you may not need to touch all the different screens and click on all the different fields. So a Fiori app is designed for you to just do your part in the process. And I have mixed feelings about that, because in a way, yes, it does simplify things for the user. But my question is, does it make that user more repetitive and less knowledgeable about what they're doing? And they don't get to always see the enterprise view of things. They just plug in their little piece to the pie and things happen in the background. So there's, it's a double-edged sword. There's good and there's some bad things with everything. But if folks are moving to S4HANA, I think it's important that they understand that there's going to be some maybe byproducts of working with Fiori apps that they should consider and make sure that their employees still know that there's a reason that they're doing what they're doing. Don't just focus on how to do it. And
Yes.
there was a question on the different books. One of the books was a business process book. That was kind of the initial book prior to the certification guidebook. And that was really one of the ones that was written specifically for students to kind of bridge that gap between academia and industry, because they don't have that industry knowledge. And then the next generation one was really the certification book, which is, as Kendall, you mentioned, it's broken down modularly. There's there's SD, there's PP. And those are all important aspects of the certification exam. So I kind of take a little bit of what was good in the first book, put it in the book, but more of a focus on certification.
One thing I also liked in regards to the book is the fact that you started talking about, when we were going over the whole history of SAP and so forth, about Hana and how Hana has, made S4 really, because, you couldn't do this unless you had Hana. And so I think a lot of people think that, you have to have, in order to do Hana, you have to have S4. And you don't. Hana's a database, so you could run ECC on Hana, you can run BW on Hana, but the whole thing is that it's making your data run faster. And what happened is that it was because of that, it changed the way you look at SAP. It simplified it down to, different things. So that's where the whole simplicity came, is because of the integration and so forth. And do you want to talk about like how you can put it on the cloud or not on the cloud, or?
Yeah, there's many different options for deployment for S4HANA. SAP is really becoming a cloud company. They're really pushing cloud. S4HANA can still be run on premise. It can be run in the cloud. You can kind of have a hybrid of both, some things on premise and in the cloud. Cloud's become a very big thing these days. Very popular, and I think initially a lot of the resistance to cloud was the security, and many of these cloud providers now I think have kind of tackled that problem of moving things to the cloud. But what's really beneficial, I think, for customers moving to the cloud is the cost of entry into SAP. It is no longer a big industry or a big business technology. A lot of small to medium enterprises now can afford to get into using the powerful ERP systems or the S4HANA system without the great expense of the infrastructure on premise. So I think it does give some benefits there. There are still a lot of folks that still may question the cloud or not be comfortable with moving to the cloud, but I think that's a direction SAP is going, and they're pretty clear about that. So they even came out with their new, it's not a product, but a new, I guess you can call it, I'm not sure what you call SAP Rise. So some of you may be familiar with SAP Rise, which is to support customers moving to the cloud. So yeah, there's a big push to go to the cloud, and that's included in the book, as well as some cloud solutions. SAP thinks for certification, it's very important to know some of the cloud solutions like Ariba and SuccessFactors and Hybris, et cetera, et cetera. So those are all covered in the book as well, so that the folks that are getting certified understand all the possibilities that SAP offers to its customers.
Yeah, I think someone was asking about SAP Sidecar, and you know, it's serving as a secondary database, and really that's just, again, making Hana, you know, and being able to do new things. I think that, you know, that's the whole key here is, you know, where our technology has led has created all these new opportunities for us. And, you know, I think that one of the things that the key thing is to understand what it is that your company is installing. That's number one. If you're a user, if you're doing something, you know, within the company, a business analyst or so forth, the best thing to do is find out, how does this all interconnect? Yeah. And how can my job affect somebody else? And how did that person affect somebody else, Yeah.
There's a great question in here that I want to address, and it's about employers showing interest in students who complete certification courses at my school at the University of South Carolina. This is something, Kendall, you and I have talked about quite a bit. You know, ERP became huge back during the Y2K era. You know, companies had to do business process reengineering, think about how they're going to do things. ERP was there. Companies looked at ERP, started implementing ERP. And it's hard to believe that, but that's, you know, 20 plus years ago that this was happening. And you and I have talked about this several times. A lot of those folks are now retiring. And I have had several people in the industry reach out to me because I'm at the university and say, you know, through attrition, we are completely lacking knowledgeable users to come in and work our systems. I just got an email the other evening, literally hours after I was talking to some folks about the ERP certification at the University of South Carolina, that undergraduates now have a path to do it. We've always had a graduate ERP certificate program. I'll talk about that in a bit too. But just out of nowhere, I get an email saying, how can I put my talent lead in touch with you for these folks? Students really don't quite get that picture, but they get an incredible leg up when they go out into industry with this knowledge already. And if you just want to look at the numbers, if you're in industry and you want to take this S4HANA certification, you're going to pay about $8,000 just for the course, and then another $600 to take the exam. Well, that's, you know, that's an investment that your company is making in their employees. If you already have folks coming out of the university with that knowledge and with that certification, that's immediate value to your enterprise. And even if they don't get the certification, the fact that they understand the business integration side of things and that they can jump right in and talk about the business. It's not always just the technology, but they get the business. And this is where the integration is key. You just never know who you're going to run into. And if you run into somebody and they ask, particularly if you're a student, you know, what do you do? Well, I go to the University of South Carolina. Oh, what courses are you taking? Well, I've done some courses with SAP. Now, we all know the eyes are going to get big, and we're going to start asking students questions about, what did you do in SAP? And if all the students can say is that, well, you know, I kind of remember creating master data for materials, and maybe I did a purchase order, and that's not going to sell. What's going to sell is when the student starts talking about, well, yeah, you know, I learned how you run MRP. I learned how you forecast, and MRP is going to integrate with the procurement process by creating purchase requisitions. And if that purchase requisition is linked or tagged to a specific production order, then I've got to know to procure that as a consumable, and it impacts me from an accounting standpoint different. When students can start talking the business, I guarantee employers are going to start picking them up off the floor and hiring them immediately. So I think they get an incredible value going through the universities, through the University Alliance. We've been doing it at University of South Carolina for about 6 years, which is when I arrived on the scene in Columbia. They had an ERP graduate certificate program, and they still do. We offer that program through our MBA program, our full-time MBA students, our international MBA students, but we also do it through executive education. So if there are companies, employers out there who want their employees to get SAP TS410 certified, they also get a academic certificate for that, which applies, can apply towards a master's degree if they don't have one, or just get a certificate. Perhaps they already have a master's degree and they want to, get more knowledge in the ERP realm, and they can get a certificate for that as well. So there are opportunities, and when I do these graduate certificate programs, I use my book. My book is used in every one of those classes, and it's really for reference. It's resource. If you don't understand something, go to the book, because that's going to help you understand what's going on. That was a long answer to a short question.
That was. And, what's funny is that, so Robert and I were talking about the whole kids learning, they've got to take these classes. I mean, we were like, it's so important. And so, Robert kind of got me up to the challenge. We were like, Robert's like, they don't listen to me. I'm just a professor. And I'm like, well, they don't listen to me because my kids don't even listen to me. And we were laughing about it. And so we said, what if we got some people who were like bigwigs at companies to say that they would do it? And so Robert and I actually got the CIO of Stanley Black & Decker and the VP of Application Development at Hubble. And the other one was, he was a
change management at Milliken.
Yeah. And so they all did video testimonials. I did one too. And so we did that, and we're putting it together and getting South Carolina to brand it to show to the kids that, yeah, it's like, these are guys that run big, giant companies, and they want you to learn ERP, SAP. I mean, that's, so that was kind of our push to try to help out. And
they couldn't have been more enthusiastic about it. And this goes to the question, are employers looking for these folks? I mean, they were incredibly enthusiastic and saying, yeah, we would love to get these folks in our business, and how valuable it is. And most of them said to a person, it's everything you do impacts other parts of the business. And again, that's part of what's in the book for this particular type of certification.
Let's see. We got some questions here. Let's look here. So if an employer is showing interest in students who are complete SAP courses at USC, are you tracking the hires in the ERP space? We've noticed that a lot of those guys are interns at the employers while they're taking the ERP classes as well. The biggest thing is that we're just not seeing enough people in this space. The kids are, Robert and I have been having this huge conversation about this. And we are laughing because, we both have kids that are, the college age or after. I kind of have the after. He has more the college age. And, they all want to do development, analytics, and all that stuff. And they don't know anything about ERP. So we are like trying to educate and trying to get people to understand that, it's important. So I think it's a matter, I don't think you guys are y'all tracking? I mean, how many you're capturing, or?
I think some schools are tracking that. They're looking at placement statistics. From a graduate perspective at the University of South Carolina, again, this is from a graduate perspective. Our executive education department does a lot of work with industry. I see there's a comment on here about the Department of Army. Their finance school is in Columbia, South Carolina. So we have been certifying folks in the Army who come in and get their academic graduate certificate in ERP. And because that's in the Army, that's very focused. So, they go back, they get the certification, they work in the Army. So from a graduate perspective, we have not tracked the placement, because a lot of what we've been doing is executive education. We're still working on that undergraduate program, which Kendall, you and I talked about. We had those video testimonials come in, and that's new. Anyone that works in a university understands the bureaucracy of getting programs. So it's taken a number of years to put together something to give our undergraduate students a path to this certification, and we've now made that happen. So that's an excellent point. I'm going to encourage our folks to track the placement for that. If I have any of our academic community folks on here, please go ahead and share your knowledge about that. I see there's also a question from Doug. Is the focus of the book to make it study for the certification much more focused instead of buying the big book? It's a supplement to the big book. Could you pass the certification from my book alone? Yes, I have taught courses using my book alone, and students have asked and folks have asked, can I go take the certification? You can attempt it. It's a supplement to the main book, but you can use my book to really focus on the important things. Like I said, when the certification manuals are written, they're this big, and I don't mean this to sound bad, but sometimes there's a lot of noise in those books, and that noise is not necessarily essential to the certification. So yes, Doug, I did kind of filter out some of that noise, put more emphasis on the more important aspects that are going to help you pass the certification and get you knowledgeable in those areas, as opposed to some of that noise and, you know, the level of granularity that's not important for the certification.
So what exactly is, like, let's talk about like TS410.
Yeah.
What is TS410?
Okay, I mean, so SAP Education, their certification all typically begin with the letter T or C for certification, T for training. The S4 is for S for Hana, so TS4, so it's training in S for Hana. The 10 is interesting because I've heard various things, but the 10 typically refers to the length of the course. So the official SAP TS410 course is 10 days in length. These are full days. So you go through the entire manual for TS410, which again is condensed in my book to a degree and a different approach to it. And then you sit for the certification. The certification is C TS410, and it's a good question, Kendall, because folks that are moving to S4 already know that there are a variety of versions as S4 is developing. You had 1610, 1709, 1809, 1909, and there are different certifications for each one of those versions. Obviously, some of the changes from, let's say, 1610 to 1709 to 1809 are bells and whistles, functionality. The core business processes don't change. The master data, the organizational levels of how it's structured in the system, the business process transactions typically don't change. So the various versions of S4, you know, the 1709, 1809 are improvements to the product. And so you'll see a variety of number of certifications based on the version of S4.
So let's say, all right, so let's say I want to get certified, right?
Yep.
And I have no idea where to go or how to do that or what type of certification I should have, and who's like, is there like a person for like all the certifications, or is it like, can I go anywhere and it's the same, or should I go to this one place where everybody is like, it's like legit?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are a number of different facets to that question. So let's start with the official SAP Education. SAP Education is an arm of SAP. They provide training and education on SAP products. And so the TS410 certification is a baby of SAP Education. It's their certification. It's an industry certification. You become an associate consultant, okay? You can go through SAP Education, go to training.sap.com. You can book courses to get the education for the knowledge needed to pass the certification. Again, that goes back to, you know, the cost for employers. It's a little over $8,000 a person to go through that. That's one path. The University Alliance program has offered a path for students to get that certification. Now, this is an important distinction. If you're going to go through a University Alliance program and you're going to take the official certification course an exam, you must be an enrolled student. Okay, so the University Alliance program, they have an agreement with SAP. There are certain things that we must abide by, and that's quite logical. If we're going to offer SAP certification, we want to make sure we're offering it to students, not just anyone off the street. So the options are you have undergraduate programs, you include courses in your undergraduate programs, maybe you have a separate certification course that's not for academic credit. Some folks have it for academic credit. Graduate programs, I'm seeing a lot of ERP graduate certificate programs where folks can get SAP certified in Ts410. So we do have folks coming in from industry that do that. As a matter of fact, our executive education program at the University of South Carolina, we're planning on having an open enrollment for the ERP graduate certificate sometime in the fall, probably between September and before Thanksgiving. So they usually last like 10 weeks or so, and it's 4 academic courses that you get graduate credit for. And in the end, as part of that, you get the S4 Hana certification, the Ts410 certification. So those are official paths to get the certification. Anyone can get the certification on their own. You can go to SAP Education today and pay for an exam and do the exam online in the cloud and pass it or fail it. If you pass it, you get the certification. If you fail it, you don't. So you could, if you wanted to individually or as a group, want to get some knowledge prior to taking that certification exam. So in an unofficial non-SAP capacity, you could go to consultants like myself or programs,
or me,
or you.
Exactly. To me, yes.
Yes, exactly.
We have to join.
Of course. And say, can you do anything to help prep folks that want to get this certification? Now, if that's the case, then we could not use any, SAP materials. Okay, so we could not use any SAP certification books. We could not use any SAP resources like a client where you go in and do your exercises. But we could teach and educate people on it enough to get the certification. Could you use my book in that environment? Absolutely. So that book could be a foundation for the knowledge you need to pass the certification. But I have to be very clear, we would not be allowed to use any official SAP content or resources if we go that route. So you have.
Would it be a good idea to actually bring you in and then have like a company that's going to go S4,
Sure.
And come in and just this is what's going to happen. This is what's, overview so that people aren't shocked.
Yeah, you could. I mean, if you had folks that wanted to get S4 Ts410 certified, you could bring me in, say, okay, we want to get certified. And that would probably, if you wanted to do it right, I would say that'd be an 8 to 10 day, investment in having me come in and educate them. Again, not SAP materials, using my book, let's say. Even if you didn't want to get certification, Kendall, and this is a good point too, maybe some companies don't want certification, but they would like their employees to have the integrated business knowledge, and they want to scope it to
management kind of idea.
Yeah, they may want to scope it to FI, CO, PP, and SD, and that's it. Well, you could scope a program, for 4 or 5 days or 3 days, whatever you want to do. And again, my book is a great resource for doing that kind of thing because it gives you the integration side of all those various aspects of the ERP S/4HANA system.
When since I talk to companies all over the place, I went to this one company and they're like, yeah, we're going to SAP. And that was their big thing. And so I would ask, somebody, do you know what SAP is? They're like, no, but I've got a mouse pad that states that I'm going to SAP, and it's pictures all down the wall that says when we're going to SAP, but I have no clue what exactly it is. However, I do know it's coming, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, this is huge. I mean, and again, I mentioned somebody emailed me the other day, and the premise of the email was, we are right in the middle of moving to S4 from our ECC system. Now is the time to get people knowledgeable in this. How can you help us? Or do you have people that we could hire that would help us? So the time is actually right for companies if they're transitioning to S4 in the next couple of years, this year, maybe 3 years from now, is to get this knowledge throughout your enterprise so that the folks know what to look forward to when you move to S4HANA. And the nice thing is, this isn't like going, we've talked about this before, this isn't like going from R3 to ECC. I mean, that was a major project. So SAP provides some tools and resources to kind of simplify moving what you currently have to the S4HANA system.
So does anybody have any? We have about 10 minutes left. So if you're interested in his book, you can get it on Amazon, and I highly recommend this. You don't have to actually take the test, but it's a great way of actually an overview of, what exactly this is all about. And I told him that he should have named it S4 for Dummies, because I think that would have been a great title for this, especially for all of the people who know SAP, have been on ECC, but are kind of like, what is S4? So that's kind of where that comes into. And I think it's a great way of doing that. And thank you, Robert, for actually writing this book. This is wonderful.
Well, thank you. I mean, I hope it helps folks. That's why I write the book. Anyone who's authored some of these books know that you don't make it to, you don't write it to make a huge profit and retire on. It doesn't usually pan out that way. But I write it to help folks, to get them better prepared for what they're going to see and what they want to do with their careers.
Yeah, I think it's perfect. I really do. And the thing is that you always wonder, how can you help people out? How can you get them in the right direction? We all have kids. We all want to point them in the right direction. And so it's the same way with all the companies, that where they're going. How do you get them all in the right direction? And this is a perfect book for that. So, however, we're going to have a new book for our next meeting. And I want to tell you guys a little bit about this one. This is it's Bill Mcdermott. I've been challenged, and yes, I was able to do it. I have Bill Mcdermott, who is going to be our next guest on the book club. And he's been gone for a little time, and over at Service now, but we are going to relive some of the things that happened back in SAP land, and kind of see, I want to ask him what happened at Sapphire, to be honest with you, but I don't know if I'll be able to get some of the dirty stuff out, like what behind the scenes, but I'll try. So this will be fun, exciting, and he's very inspirational, and I think it'll be great for him to talk to us, and we're super excited. I hope you are as well. We're going to start passing the news all around. So we were laughing. Robert said, "Now it's hard to fill Robert's shoes." So and I said, "Well, let me see what I can do on that." I'll try.
Got big shoes to fill following me.
Too funny. So anyway, I hope everybody attends our next book club, and it's going to be on 5/27. We have a little break in between. Might do some little things in between, but but you never know. We're going to kind of be prepared for him, for Bill. So yes, that's our big news. So yay! So thank you, everybody, and I think this was wonderful. And next time we'll have Bill Mcdermott, and be super excited. Invite all your friends, and also make sure that you join the book club group on LinkedIn. We actually have a group, and that gives you all the inside info. And any more requests for Daisy posing, just let me know. And I will have our superstar.
I can't have her all to myself.
I know. Did you see? Nobody commented on Lily's picture? Poor Lily. I did her on one, but she was not as good as Daisy. So thank you, and thank you, Robert. And I guess that's the end. Thank you so much. Y'all have a great day. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.